Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Voici le résultat du scrutin. Majorité requise pour l'adoption de la motion de censure 288. Pour l'adoption 331. La majorité requise étant atteinte...
When Emmanuel Macron called a snap election for July, it seemed to take everyone by surprise, including his own party. The gamble partly paid off in that Le Pen's far-right party, Rassemblement National, which had been significantly ahead in the polls all year and had just romped the European elections, came third in terms of seats, with a hastily cobbled-together left coalition Nouveau Front Populaire first and Macron's Ensemble second. What this created, however, is a parliament of three large blocks of similar power that agree on nothing, cue months of negotiations, and finally Michel Barnier, yes, that one, being unveiled as Prime Minister in September. Barnier has been trying to negotiate a budget that could get through this parliament since then and failing. Finally, a negotiation even more difficult than Brexit. In the end, he decided to put the budget to a vote, making it a confidence matter. Put up or shut up. Spoilers, the French Parliament did not shut up. Both the far right and left turned against him, and so he has resigned. So what now? Cue our favourite French connection, our own Chevalier Olivier Morel. Olivier is a partner at the law firm Cripps, chair of the UK chapter of the French Foreign Trade Advisors, on the board of the French Chamber of Great Britain, and a Knight of the Légion d'Honneur. I spoke to him late Friday night after the Macron speech.
Quiet, Ryan.
Hello, Olivier.
Hello, Alex. Good to see you.
Welcome back. Right, so can we do some basic catching up just for our listeners, first of all, because they may not have been following what's been going on in France the last couple of months. So what led up to a vote of no confidence in Michel Barnier? What was the central issue?
He has been trying, as we know, for the last two and a half months to negotiate with you have the parliament with three blocks who can't agree with each other, so there's no majority. So he's been trying to broker some kind of compromise with everyone, and he knows a thing or two about compromise, but I think even he was very, very stretched. And I think it came to a point where he probably felt he had gone far enough, and it was a case of saying, right, there's no point this kind of drip of, oh, give me this, I'll give you that, etc. He probably felt it was going nowhere, so he used what is a well-known device in the French constitution, which is to say, here is my proposal. This is, in this case, the social security budget. It doesn't really matter what piece of legislation, but here's a piece of legislation. If you don't agree with it, I put my responsibility on the line, and that of my government. So if you vote it down, I go down.
Right.
In this case, both extreme left and right brought him down, used this to bring him down.
If I remember correctly, back to when we were talking about it, first of all, he had the sort of acquiescence of the right. He never had the left, right? So the left, in a way, didn't break faith with this coalition government. It was actually the right that had said theoretically okay to Barnier that actually then turned against him. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the New Popular Front, which is the alliance of the left-wing parties, had said, we are the biggest political formation in Parliament. We should have had a Prime Minister from our ranks. And on that basis, it's our program or nothing. So he had to then turn, and that's where it became gradually obvious that he was a sort of hostage to, in particular, Marine Le Pen's party. She had a sort of thumbs up, thumbs down role about his tenure, and she was a sort of kingmaker, I suppose. He was accused of sort of making, a concession to her and another one, and then in the end, as often is the case, he realized it was leading nowhere. That was really the trigger of the end.
Now, Macron just made a speech as we speak on Thursday evening. There was an expectation, I think, earlier in the day. Certainly French journalists seemed to think that he would announce a new prime minister this evening. And it was meant to be a sort of live address. But then as the day went on, it emerged that it was only going to be a pre-taped short statement and that it wouldn't include the announcement of a new prime minister. So I guess it was a sort of holding statement, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. And I think I would possibly be a little bit more cautious about. I think there were speculations that he might, as opposed to expectation, all throughout the day. But you're right. It went from sort of warmish to tepid to quite. By about 4:00, people realized it was not going to happen. He's not known for making very quick decisions, as we've seen with the appointment of Barnier over the summer. There's a few things that come out of this speech, and we can go into it. But certainly, there was one thing that was clear. Is that there will be a new prime minister, and he used the word within a few days. So, as we know, there's the big event of the weekend is the reopening
of the Notre Dame, of course,
with the world's sort of leaders coming, and so he may not want to, with his sense of occasion, may not want to mix that with the appointment. So it may be that Barnier goes to this event as the caretaker prime minister, and then the new prime minister is announced early next week.
Were there any clues as to which way he's leaning?
Well, that's an interesting. I've got my crystal ball. It sounds as if the left has slightly softened their line of the program, just the program, only the program. As we know, it's an alliance of La France Insoumise, which is a very far left political party, to the old, the socialists who were a party of government for many years. They were basically Labour, and some of those MPs have actually publicly said they do not want him to resign, because that's another topic that's been obviously at the backdrop.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Some of them have actually, formally and publicly said, no, we don't want more chaos to add to the situation. What we want is stability. But to come back to the question of who, there are two names currently being mentioned, and on the face of it, it's a little odd. One is Sébastien Lecornu, who's the current army minister, who is very close to him, and you'd think that possibly that's a red rag to his opponents. But there are reasons why he might be the person, because he apparently has good relations both with the far right, or certainly workable relations with the far right, as well as some of the sort of moderate left. The second name that is in the hat at the moment is François Bayrou, who's the sort of veteran, I'd call him a kind of Lib Dem, really, of French politics, who has stood for president several times. But again, he's someone who, a bit like Macron, is a sort of neither left nor, certainly is prepared to work with both sides. He famously, in 2022, as a Republican act, he endorsed Marine Le Pen to become a candidate to the presidential election. You have to gather a number of signatures from people in elected positions, mayors, MPs, senators. At one stage, it looks as if she was struggling a bit to get the names. And he said, as a kind of gesture to say, very Voltaire, I may disagree with you, but I'll fight like hell so that you can be heard. He signed up her kind of an endorsement for her. But equally, he can talk to the traditional left-wing parties. So he's the second name that people have mentioned. But like last time, so many names had been mentioned.
But still no one from the left.
You're right. It's an interesting point. No one from the straight kind of, from the party.
Because, I recall back then that his reason for not appointing someone from within the left coalition that had effectively won the most votes at the election was that he believed they couldn't survive a vote of no confidence. And now the person he's chosen didn't survive a vote of no confidence. So won't there be a legitimate argument to say, well, try someone from our side.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I think the reasoning is possibly that we discussed it last time, straight after the election in July. If people had said Barnier, everyone would have said, are you insane? Then, as things then were in September, it sort of made kind of sense. I think the difficulty, if it did, and you're right. I mean, the LFE, the broadly the left coalition, would, of course, to say why don't you appoint one of us? I think that the difficulty there again, I guess the reasoning is someone who is obviously in a camp will then face the opposition from the other side. The difficulty is we're no further forward than we were, not much further than we were straight after the election in July, and that's the real worry.
It's going to be François Hollande, isn't it?
That would be the ultimate irony. I think I could bet my salary it's not going to be. No, I don't think so.
Don't bet your salary, because stranger things have happened.
Le mandat que vous m'avez démocratiquement confié est un mandat de 5 ans, et je l'exercerai pleinement jusqu'à son terme.
Can I ask you, what does this mean sort of practically for the governing of France? There's now, the budget hasn't gone through. There are limits, I guess, to the executive powers of the president. So what happens now? How do they go forward? And what effect is it having on the economy?
Yes, so that's a very, very key point, obviously. Now, I'll just mention it in passing so that we can dismiss it instantly. There is an article in the French Constitution, which I think is Article 16, which gives emergency powers to the president, and that's obviously not going. People have mentioned it, I think, in jest. Just to give you context, it was used once by de Gaulle in 1962, I think, during the war in Algeria. So it's either 61, 62, when there was a group of generals who were mounting a coup in Algeria. So obviously we're not there, so we can dismiss that. And he has been explicit in the short speech that he did tonight. And I think his message was both to the business world and the markets, as well as generally the electors, is to say that the objective would be to pass a sort of technical budget, which would simply be a repetition of the last year's budget. So it would be a status quo. So in a little bit, I suppose, like it happens in America every year, there's this.
Like Congress passes an extension, basically, when they can't agree.
Exactly. So
that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what they do.
So it's that, but obviously it's not satisfactory. But and there's all sorts of impacts because, for instance, what budgets do every year. There are quite a few payments that are indexed on inflation. Well, that does not happen. So sadly, you could find that people who were expecting certain allowances and certain payments to go up, that's not going to happen. So it could cost people, they could feel it in their pockets, which would have, you can imagine the effect it would have on their attitude.
I mean, who would people blame in that eventuality?
Him. I mean, that is the
lightning rod.
Lightning rod. Oh, yeah. And I think listening to him, I don't think he's totally aware of how, and I'm struck whenever I speak to French people, I have various feelings, but I don't have that one towards him, but he seems to attract extreme kind of reactions. It seems to attract a lot of opprobrium from all quarters. I mean, the loathing that he seems to trigger is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic, if you stay in the middle of the road, you get run over.
Yeah.
Can I take you on a slight side issue, just because I noticed it today? Yep. So I was getting some intel from contacts in the Commission that they are about to announce this big deal with Mercosur.
Oh, yeah.
The Confederation of Latin American countries, which is really quite a big deal for the EU. And part of what Macron did today is to say that France would object to it.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of this? I mean, he's at a low point of authority, I guess. Is this a good time for him to be stamping his feet at the European level? Or is it a reaction to his ebbing authority that
Well, I think on that, the kind of farmers' union in France have been up in arms against it, saying in effect it will open the floodgates to products that will compete with the French product. France is the biggest agricultural exporter, and it's the biggest farming industry in Europe.
So the last thing he needs, I guess, is a farmers' protest.
Yes,
and
I think that's the one thing where, and I don't think it's new that he's expressed his opposition to it. I think technically there is a veto process to Ursula von der Leyen going off and signing this off. But I think there needs to be, it's either 4 countries objecting or countries representing more than a certain percentage of the overall electorate of the union or something like that. There is a mechanism, but France could find itself on its own. So I think what he's doing is saying this, which is, A, it's not inconsistent with, I think, France's position before, but 2, right now, yes, I think it's completely consistent with doing, obviously, I'm looking for areas where I can agree with someone. But I think that one is not, it's not contrived. I think that's always been the case.
Understood.
Yeah, there was talk tonight of a kind of collision course with, people were saying, oh gosh, what's all this is going on in France, and we're sort of navel gazing, the EU is carrying on and going off and signing things, not quite behind our back, but I mean, that was the sort of feeling,
Yeah, and it has been an interesting period, I think, with both Berlin and Paris being so self-involved in a way with domestic politics.
Yeah.
And really lacking the authority to make their voice heard.
Yeah.
There is a sense that I get that the EU Commission is sensing an opportunity a little bit to sort of take over
Yeah, well,
the governing of Europe,
And that, in a way, they would be, I suppose, within their role to do that. But you're right. I think both France and Germany, don't have the bandwidth to deal with that kind of thing, let alone be seen by others to be in a position to dictate whatever they feel is their priorities or lead. And in any case, I think that's a real worry.
The other thing that he made completely clear, I think, tonight was that he's not going anywhere. He will leave that building in 2027 unless there is some sort of revolution. And so we know also that Marine Le Pen is in a little bit of legal trouble. And there's a decision coming as to whether she might actually be barred from standing at the next election. So does that mean we might end up in the next presidential election with effectively both the incumbent party and the main challenger not being in the mix?
It's quite possible. I mean, he did say, you're right, there are a few things that were clear in that speech, is that he repeated it several times, 30 months, I am not going anywhere. And in a way, I think from his point of view, that was framing it in a sort of positive way. We have kind of 30 months to do something. I think he's trying in an obvious way not to be the sort of lame duck.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't a judgment. Yeah. It's probably the sensible thing to do in any case from an economic and a market's perspective anyway, to say, look, there may be that instability there, but this part of the state is stable and has 2.5 years to go. So it's not all quicksand.
Correct. You're right that we could find, 30 months is a very long time. So there are many people who see themselves as you could already clearly see, there's something like half a dozen candidates on each side of the political spectrum who all think they could make it. But you could have, certainly, he disappears mechanically because he can't stand again. Yep. And Marine Le Pen is no longer there. I mean, there were also some speculations that she's slightly concerned that her young protégé, Mr. Bardella, is rather too popular for her liking, and she's trying to reassert her authority. That plus the court case, plus I'm told her dad is not very well. So all this creates an environment where I think she's trying to force the tempo, because she thinks that creating chaos is going to be the best way for her to get to a new election. I mean, there's no constitutional way or legal mechanism for him to go.
No, it's just a matter basically of everything becoming so bad that he has no choice. Yeah. But it does seem a far-fetched.
Yeah. But I would just add there that whilst when it was mentioned even 2 months ago, I would sort of dismiss it, and many people dismissed it. Now, it's not that it's possible, but it's still being talked about. And the fact that he feels he has to say quite firmly, I'm here to stay, I think it shows that the background music is there and it's not going away. And perhaps, this is something that, whilst it was almost impossible 2 months ago, now it's unlikely, but the likelihood of it happening is increasing a little.
Yeah. And the timing is not ideal in terms of international affairs as well. You know, Trump coming into the White House, Ukraine will need defending effectively from Europeans because we know what Trump's attitude is on the issue. So I guess what I'm asking is there a way for the situation to stabilize quite quickly? Can you see a path for the situation to stabilize quite quickly so that by the new year there is a slightly more authoritative voice coming from France in the context of both European politics and NATO, most importantly?
I'm not terribly optimistic, no, because I think we could see a repeat. These last 3 months could repeat itself again. There's an emergency budget, so the country kind of functions. But there are no ingredients for this deadlock between three main blocks in Parliament who cannot agree on anything. That's not going to move. So the new election can only take place a year after the last one, so not until the end of June.
So we're talking about, July.
There's no reason why the result of that election wouldn't, again, you throw up the cards and they'll fall again in broadly the same proportion. So it's very hard to know how you get out of that. And that's where you end up with a scenario, is the only way to solve it that you launch the boil, or some people think you launch the boil, by a new presidential election, because the constitution as it's been drafted just is not designed to cope with this particular situation. It's simply not able to do that.
Okay, Olivier, thank you very much. That's, I guess, clear in that it's very unclear.
Yes.
If I asked you to sort of take a bet at which way you think it might shake out in the sort of medium term, would you say we're looking at another election next summer, possibly together with a presidential election?
No.
Or would you say there is a way to find someone who will cobble together a coalition?
If I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was, I would say elections as soon as is possible, technically, next summer. And until then, more of the same, sadly.
Could the election be announced way ahead of time? I'm just thinking, if he appointed someone and everyone was, unhappy, could that person be given a few months' grace by Macron saying, look, I know you're all unhappy, stick with this, and we will have an election in the summer? So could he say now that I will call an election next July as an offering?
I think to
keep them.
I can see what you mean, which is the message to MPs would be, please don't rock the boat because you're going to have your chance. So, I mean, it's an interesting thought. I don't know the answer technically. Basically, it's a political decision. Whether saying it now is a good thing or would backfire, or whether he would want to wait until the last minute. My instinct is the latter. But you're right, it's not a silly idea to say, let's have some stability for a few months and you'll have your go. I don't think there is a technical way of locking that in, as it were, until much later. So would people believe him?
I know what you mean. It's just that part of the instability, I guess, is because people are pushing for an election. So maybe if you gave them the election, there would be less of this.
But as a I would
turn.
The election that everyone wants is concentrating on is the big one, is the presidential election, because then this is the big job, and that's the trouble.
Thank you, Olivier. Wonderful as ever.
Thank you, Alex.
A prime minister has not been brought down in France by a vote of no confidence in 60 years, so this is no small constitutional matter. Last night, Macron asked the country to take inspiration from the rebuilding of the Notre Dame, which is due to reopen this weekend. Rebuild the nation with wisdom rather than division, he asked. Two polls this morning both show a majority in France want Macron to step down. The newspaper front pages provide no more comfort. Right-wing Le Figaro says Macron is refusing to accept responsibility. The left-wing Libération accuses him of flagrant denial. And the centrist Le Monde says he stands alone facing a crisis. But financial markets seem, at least so far, to be taking it all in their stride, having priced in the instability after the July election. And, as Olivier pointed out, there is no constitutional mechanism for ousting a sitting president. He's meeting party leaders today, and we will, of course, keep an eye on developments. If you value our work, you can support our work on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and tell the world about Quiet Riot. Being a well-kept secret ain't going to pay for our morning croissants. We shall meet again on Sunday morning. So, à bientôt.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads, with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sanguita, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker with a website that fits your unique vision and drives you towards your goals. Let your ideas flow with AI tools that guide you, but give you full control and flexibility. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. Get everything you need to turn your part-time passion into a full-time business. Go to Wix.com.